you doing? It's 2025 and the book guy is back with a new title sequence and more book videos to help you find something to read. We are starting a new monthly theme of YAnuary, spending the month of January looking at young adult books that you might like to read. I'm here to celebrate young adult books for the work they do in helping to get new readers into books or get old readers back into them. Or, you know, people who just like young adult books all the time. Today we're looking at the Grishaverse. There are 7 books in this series by Leigh Bardugo. You may have heard of this one because of the Netflix series Shadow and Bone. These 7 books are all set in the same world, so that's a lot of books for a young adult series. It's not as complex or as advanced as some of the other heavier fantasy series out there, but I consider this to be a totally valid gateway fantasy into some heavier world building and bigger fantasy epics later on. Before I explain the story, let me just clarify. So there are 7 books that are split into groups. So we have the original trilogy, which is Shadow and Bone. Then we have the Six of Crows duology, so 2 books, then the King of Scars duology, 2 books, in that order. Today we're talking about all of them. I'll explain each of their strengths and weaknesses, how they all fit together, etc. Let's begin. The country of Ravka has a big problem. Someone opened a portal to hell, and now no one can close it again. There is a huge wall of darkness known as the Fold, or the Unsea, stretching the full length of Ravka and splitting it in half. Inside this darkness are all sorts of ungodly flesh-eating monsters. This was opened by a Grisha, a magician who tried and failed to power up.
Fine, I was trying something and it didn't work.
Unfortunately, people still have to travel through this fold all the time. The country is split in half, and so travel is essential for trade, farming, e-commerce. Otherwise, the country would starve. Worst of all, the neighbouring countries of Ravka now want nothing to do with them and their Grisha after the horrors they unleashed on the world. So these nations now guard their borders, meaning the Ravkans cannot travel around the fold. So now the Grisha work as soldiers and guardians, helping to ferry people across the fold, even as they are subject to people's scorn and hate for creating the fold in the first place. However, there is a prophecy of a chosen one. Since the fold was created by a Grisha with dark powers, one day it will be banished by someone with the powers of light. We all await the Sun Summoner. I wonder if it will be our main character. Okay, so there's a decent amount of world building here, but I also want to manage your expectations quite specifically. This is still a young adult series, so it's not too complex. If you think of it in terms of a swimming pool, so if like the Cosmere or Wheel of Time, bigger, deeper series are fully in the deep end, Grishaverse is, well, not exactly in the shallow end, more like just standing on the first step into the pool and the water's up to your calves. It's more than just dipping your toe, but it's still not that deep. It's also not trying to be. Still, let's get out the map. So in the middle of the map is the main country of Ravka, and you can see the fold is running just center left, that big, long, dark stretch right through the middle. As you can see, it's pretty big. Now, the country of Ravka is heavily inspired by Russia, so both in culture and mythology. And people often praise the Grishaverse for using Russia as a world-building source, since that is not too common. And that is true, it is a very unique aesthetic. But you won't learn a lot about Russian culture in reading this. It's not like The Witcher, where it dives deeply into Polish culture and Eastern Europe mythology, almost educating the reader as they go. Grisha only does a little bit of this. In the Grishaverse, the Russian culture shows up in the names, so every character has a Russian name. It's completely outside of the English lexicon, but it's still pretty easily pronounceable, so like Alina, Nikolai, Alexander, etc. There's also Russian religion, so they worship the saints, much like in Russian Orthodox, the main religion of Russia. We have Russian monsters like the Volkra, so big winged demon bats that swoop down and carry people off. And we have a bit of folklore, like the magic creatures that we see on the front cover of the first 3 books. So there's a decent amount of world building. Again, not too much more than that. But adding to this unique aesthetic is the technology. So this world is very much a flintlock fantasy with guns, ships, and post-industrial revolution. Although it's a little less flintlock like America's War of Independence, and much closer to World War I, and that level of technology, especially in the later books. Reading King of Scars actually reminded me a bit of All Quiet on the Western Front, although without all the brutality. So combining technology with magic means that there's plenty here to make this world unique and intriguing. Now back to the map. The first trilogy, Shadow and Bone, takes place almost entirely in Ravka. However, Series 2, Six of Crows, takes place on the island continent of Kerch. So this country is much more inspired by Dutch culture, specifically Amsterdam, in that it's a much more multicultural hub and it's a major port of travel. Six of Crows also spends a bit of time up in Fjorda and the city of Dyrholm. This is important to know because the first two sub-series within the Grishaverse have very little to do with each other. They're in separate parts of the world, with separate characters and separate stories. Finally, the King of Scars duology returns back to Ravka for the most part. This time there is a little bit more crossover with Six of Crows locations and characters, but the focus is very much once again on our main country. This duology is very much a sequel to the original Shadow and Bone. The biggest link between all three of these series is actually the magic. So this is a medium magic system, so it's still a bit on the soft side, but not too complex either. It's pretty easy to get into this magic system without too much strenuous study. It's perfect for young adults. Seriously, medium magic system and young adult go together so well. There are 3 branches of magic that we'll look at today, although there are a few subgroups within those categories, but we won't go into that. The first group is the Ethelrelki. They are the order of summoners. So they summon elemental magic, so like light, darkness, fire, earth, wind, that sort of thing. These guys do the big battle magic, and they're always on the front lines of war. These guys are the rock stars. Second is the Corporalki, the order of the living and dead. They focus their magic inward on the body, so they can heal the sick. They can magically alter their own appearance and create disguises. Or they can, stop a person's heart. These are the most feared and distrusted of all Grisha. They're the goth kids. Finally, there's the Materialki, the order of fabricators. And yes, that is spelt with a K. They focus their magic outwardly on objects, creating magical devices and amplifiers that do a whole bunch of things. They're always in their labs doing crazy science stuff, and they are kind of considered the weakest of the Grisha. They're the nerds. Now that should give you some idea of what to expect, but I also need to criticize the magic too, because there's a certain amount of magic just kind of doing whatever it needs to for plot reasons, particularly in the first trilogy. If they need to accomplish a task, they have just enough magic to do it, or just not enough. Sometimes magic does strange things because reasons. The magical battles are less a competition of skill or a measure of character, and more about who is pointing their metaphorical wand with a more tortured expression. And if you ever have questions about how it all works, well, they just use a phrase, like calls to like, to justify anything. That phrase ends up being like a get-out-of-jail-free card to excuse any weird stuff.
That doesn't explain anything!
So it's still very much a magic system on the softer side. Remember, hard magic or soft magic systems are not inherently better or worse than the other. It really does depend on what your story is for, but you have to be careful. You can't use magic of any kind to solve a problem without the reader understanding how or why. Otherwise, it just looks like plot convenience. Still, in my humble opinion, the most interesting part of the Grishas is their persecution. After a Grisha created the Fold, well, everyone blames all Grisha. Hashtag not all Grisha. Yet in Ravka, they still have to rely on the Grisha to get them through the Fold. So in this country at least, they still have some legal status and rights, even if no one likes them. But in other countries, like Fjorda in particular, Grisha are hunted. They literally have state-sponsored bounty hunters who kill them on sight. Bit like the White Cloaks from Wheel of Time. But not all countries are like this. Over in Novyi Zem, Grisha are hallowed.
That's good.
Because they believe a Grisha's blood makes good medicine.
That's bad.
So it's not great to have magic in this world. Much of the wider story is about Grisha finding a role in society and advocating for their rights as human beings. Still, that's all the world building and magic stuff that links all these series together. Let's focus on the story of each series separately, and we'll finally get into Shadow and Bone. Okay, so this is the starting point of the world, and yet, even the more die-hard Grisha fans will have to admit this trilogy is weaker than Six of Crows. In many ways, this was her practice series. It's not bad, but the series gets better. What makes this one weaker? Well, like many young adult series, this book relies on a lot of familiar tropes. It's very trope heavy, and of course tropes can be exactly what a reader is looking for, and they can still be new for younger readers, but older, jaded cynics like me sometimes wish they were a little more original. So here are a few of the tropes we'll see, and that'll explain the plot lines of this trilogy. We have the Chosen One trope, the orphan protagonist, a quest for a magical MacGuffin, ×3. Rebellion against an evil empire, a love triangle, thief with the heart of gold, boy next door, rags to riches, and a few other tropes that I can't include here without spoilers. Now I can already hear the comments. Oh, young adult has so many tropes, you should read fantasy and sci-fi because they never have tropes. Look, some people like tropes, some don't. If you don't like tropes, you probably don't want to read this series. That's pretty straightforward. That's why I make these videos, so you know what to expect. But don't go read the series just so you can complain about tropes, like that's on you. Alright, let's touch on the characters before we move on to the next series. So in Shadow and Bone characters, they're all tropes here too. It's tropes all the way down. Alina is our main heroine. She's an orphan cartographer who just wants to avoid conscription into the army and avoid the fold. She's also childhood friends with Mal, a super friendly guy who's all sunshine to Alina's storm clouds. He's a soldier, and they often travel together whenever they can, just enjoying each other's company. However, when things get weird and magical, they meet the Darkling, a mysterious Grisha and leader of Ravka's second army. He's the top Grisha around here. He shows up to teach Alina about magic, but shockingly, the guy called the Darkling may have an ulterior motive. Again, there's a little over-reliance on tropes in how these characters are written. However, this is also why things improve a lot going into the next series. In the crime-filled city of Ketterdam, Kaz Breaker is a petty criminal, conman, and thief. He is hired by one of the big bosses of the city to do an impossible heist, to break into the ice fortress and kidnap a brilliant scientist working there. So Kaz puts together a crew of crows. He's not sure how many he'll need. It's 6. The book is called 6 of Crows, so there's 6 of them. Come on. Anyway, all 6 of these crows have a very particular set of skills. Each one has a piece of the puzzle they need to pull off this perfect heist. That is, if they can stand each other long enough to get the job done. Kaz must manage the rising tensions and keep them all working together so they can get the biggest payday of their lives. And yet, each of these 6 crows has a secret. And Kaz might have the biggest secret of all. You see, for him, this isn't about money, it's about vengeance. And he'll stop at nothing until he achieves his. Okay, so no spoilers here, but there is a heist in book 1 and a heist in book 2, 2 separate jobs. And it comes with all of your usual heist storylines. So there's a lot of planning and scheming, then there's a double cross and a surprise reveal, and it's glorious every time.
Now get a move on. It's heist time.
But what makes this heist different from other heists we've seen is the flintlock technology and the Grisha Magic. These are creative little tools that are fun to play with and add a certain spice to the story. That said, you may be instantly tempted to compare this heist with other fantasy heist stories like Mistborn or perhaps Skin Game from the Dresden Files. You know, the concept is Ocean's 11 but with magic. But I should also manage your expectations. Grisha is still a medium magic system, so it's not as sophisticated or as complex as other fantasy heists that I've seen. It's still a good heist, just don't go into it expecting crazy hard magic quantum mechanics and you'll be fine. The real strength of these heists actually come from the crows themselves. So this is the strength of the duology. We've got 6 protagonists and they're actually balanced very, very well. Each of our team has a secret past and a backstory, and yes, we do explore some of them through flashbacks to show what their motivations are for the present. Everyone is doing this heist for different reasons, and they all have a reason to clash with someone else on the team. As much as I'd truly love to dive into all 6 of these characters, we'll just look at 3 for time's sake. So there's Nina. Nina is the Grisha on the team, and she was a minor character in Shadow and Bone, and serves as a link between these 2 series. So Nina is the hot one. And I don't mean that to sound derogatory. She literally wears her beauty as armor and presents herself as strong. It's all a mask and a performance that she hides behind, because underneath is some real darkness. Now Nina is a Grisha from Ravka. Opposite her is Matthias, a Fjordan, Ravka's traditional enemy. Plus, Matthias used to be a witch hunter who would hunt and kill Grisha according to the law of his people. These two have every reason to hate each other. Not to mention, Matthias also does everything by the book. He's stubborn and inflexible and doesn't work well with the team. He's a bit of a zealot sometimes. Somehow Kaz has to get Nina and Matthias to work together. Speaking of Kaz, our leader is perhaps the most complex of all. A brilliant yet haunted young man who has to use a walking cane for mobility. Kaz wears gloves all the time and cannot bear to be touched. We don't really know why. He doesn't talk much about what's in his past. But whatever it is, it drives him forward with this burning determination that can achieve the impossible. Now, as good as the character work is in this duology, I feel compelled to remind you that this is still a young adult series, which means there will be a certain element of teenage drama to the character arcs, which is a legitimate type of character arc. That is a story worth telling. I just don't want anyone to go read this book and be like, what? Young adult drama in a young adult book? 1 star. Don't be that person. Moving on, let's look at the latest series, the King of Scars duology. Our fan-favorite character, Nikolai, is back. Nikolai is a supporting character in both of the earlier series. He's the charming captain of a ship. He's not a pirate, he's a privateer. Those are completely different. But now he's the lead character in this story, and things got a whole lot more complicated for our dashing rogue. After a century of the Fold choking their economy, Ravka is now very weak, and after a civil war, Ravka is now just on the brink of collapse, and the neighboring countries smell blood in the water. Nikolai finds himself in the delicate role of trying to heal this broken country and establish order once again. But the clock is ticking. If Ravka cannot unify, they will be vulnerable to foreign invasion. Yet that's not the only challenge Nikolai faces. He is now subject to a cruel curse, where every night when the sun goes down, he transforms into a mindless, hideous beast.
By night one way, by day another.
If the public found out about his dark secret, he would lose all credibility. People's trust in him would fail, and with it, any hope of Ravka's survival. This duology follows on directly after Shadow and Bone, so a lot of the same characters, same location, and a few old plot lines too are picked up again. There is some reference and crossover to Six of Crows, but this really is the Shadow and Bone sequel. Also, I have to keep a few things about this one vague to avoid spoiling the end of Trilogy 1. King of Scars is unique out of all the 3 sub-series, because the scope is so much wider. This one is all about rebuilding a broken country and the looming threat of war. There's a lot more political intrigue, commanding armies, appeasing the masses. There's also a lot of preparing for the possibility of war, so trying to negotiate with other countries while experimenting with new technologies and new magics. This series escalates all of these things. Now, there is one thing I should make clear. This is a strange duology, where Book 1 does a lot of setup and Book 2 does all the delivery. It's very one or the other. I've seen Book 1 get some negative reviews, but by the time I read the second, I was thinking, okay, I get it now. So you really should read these two together as one story. The plot lines of these 2 books actually focus around our 3 main point of view characters. First, we have Nikolai, who is dealing with his curse and his unexpected role of leadership, something this charming buccaneer never wanted. People are looking to him for hope. Others want to claim what he has. Nikolai has to put all his charm to use. His plotline also incorporates the developing of new technologies for the war. The age of the rifle is drawing to a close. The age of tanks and missiles is on the horizon. Magic may soon become obsolete. Our second character is Zoya, a returning character from the first trilogy. She's probably the most powerful Grisha of them all, and she acts as Nikolai's personal bodyguard. She's searching for redemption for her past mistakes. She's also studying some big magics. Her plotline takes us to the heart of the saints, the creation of the world, and the birth of the Grisha themselves. Zoya is about to uncover some ancient secrets. Finally, we have Nina, again, from the Six of Crows duology. She's back now. She's working as a spy in Fjorda, Ravka's ancient enemy. She's trying to find a way to bring peace between these 2 countries before they resort to war. Nina's also dealing with how the last duology ended, yeah? Remember, she has the ability to alter her appearance? Well, so she uses that to step into the world of politics and plays an elaborate, shall we say, game of houses. This duology also ages up the story a little more. Where Shadow and Bone is very young adult and quite friendly overall, this one gets a little bit darker and deals with the complexities of life. We'll get to that more in just a second. First, we need to finally discuss the TV series. So how does the TV series compare to the books? Because I know a lot of you might be watching this video because you watched the TV series first. Well, this is typical of me. I am the book guy, so I haven't watched the TV show. I only watched the first episode. But the reviews on this one are quite interesting. You see, the TV series makes the, shall we say, bold choice of trying to tell the story of both the first trilogy and the Six of Crows duology at the same time. It's definitely a choice. But as we saw on the map, these two stories have almost nothing to do with each other. They're on separate continents. The only link is Grisha Magic and the world itself. The general consensus is that people loved the visuals of the show and adored a lot of the casting in particular, and the actors did great in their roles, but they also said the story was very bloated and the pacing was off, which is to be expected for putting these two series together. The show also introduces a lot of subplots that no one asked for. The biggest difference is that this show is very clearly trying to be the next Game of Thrones. Grishaverse is not Game of Thrones. Hell, don't hate me for this, but I'd say it's closer to Narnia than Game of Thrones. So the show has such a strong tonal shift away from the source material to make it darker and edgier, which probably didn't do it any favors. Overall, people still think Netflix cancelled the show far too early. Damn greedy corporates. But the takeaway is that the show and the books are very different. If you enjoy one, it's worth doing the other for different reasons. Okay, I do have to address the elephant in the room, and it's a very big elephant today. While researching this video, I started finding social media posts and TikToks urging people to stop reading Leigh Bardugo, to cancel her, if you will. And I was a bit surprised by this, so I started doing some research. You know, instead of just believing the first thing I saw online, I fact-checked it. Crazy, I know. So I found out that Leigh is Jewish. She was born in Jerusalem and currently holds dual citizenship for America and Israel. So yes, we are discussing that situation today, because I know many readers are concerned about reading books if they don't support the author's beliefs, and that's an important conversation. Now, before we discuss the specifics, I need to make my own stance clear here, because I wholeheartedly believe that what is happening in Gaza right now is a genocide, and that Israel is a fascist, apartheid state, carrying out mass crimes against humanity. I want to see a free Palestine, and I want to see every Israeli war criminal put on trial for violating international law. You should also know I am not opening this up to discussion here. I'll simply be blocking any pro-genocide comments on the video. My channel is not the platform for you to express those views. Please do not try to justify fascism, apartheid, or genocide, because those are three of the most evil things humanity has ever come up with. Take that shit somewhere else. Now that's settled, I was happy to find that Leigh Bardugo has actually been pro-Palestine for a very long time. This is a tweet from her back in 2020, back when the issue wasn't so prevalent in our popular consciousness. She clearly states she is not a Zionist, she supports a free Palestine, and being Jewish does not affect that. Over the years, she's also retweeted numerous other posts in support of Palestine. So it seems that a lot of the people online who are calling out to cancel Leigh are mostly doing it because she's Israeli, and that's it. And I don't think that's fair. You can't hold a majority responsible for the actions of a few. Blaming all Jews for Israel's crimes is a lot like blaming, well, all of Gaza for the October 7 attacks. Remember, collective punishment is a war crime for good reason. It is unjust. Finally, some people still claimed that Leigh is not speaking out enough about this issue. And she actually addressed this herself in a Q&A session you can find online when someone directly asked her about Palestine. And she said she has stopped a lot of her online activism because she thought she was being more performative than genuine. But she reaffirmed at the end this exact quote: "I don't think anyone can see the bloodshed and heartbreak and loss in Gaza and not feel sadness and shame and grief. That is something I experience every day." Hi, Nynaeve. Nynaeve wants attention. I think she can sense I'm a little anxious. She ended by saying, "That's all I can offer, and I understand if that's not enough." So I would also add that Leigh's books deal with humanitarian themes, such as people being displaced by war, persecution of a minority, and yes, collective punishment. She's aware of these issues. Oh, there you go. So I had to address all of that today. I want to make it very clear that I am still happy to make a video about Leigh Bardugo's books and endorse her writing. And I hope this assures any concerns you might have about ethically reading her books. But this leads us to our next topic. So there is a lot of good representation in this series. First, there is 50-50 male and female characters, all very close to it. Women are everywhere in this series, and they're written just as competently as all the male characters. Women are in leadership roles, and props to her for also writing men who are allowed to be vulnerable and talk about their feelings in healthy ways. There's a lot of people of color in this series too, and it's more than just skin color as well. We have tensions between different people groups with their different cultures and religions, but we also see people learning to understand and bridge the gap between races. We see a lot of the good and bad side of racial themes in this story. There's also a steady queer presence in the book. Now, it is a little bit subtle a lot of the time. It's rather quiet and understated. So a lot of the characters are queer-coded with their sexuality not explicitly stated. Yet there are also very clear gay and bisexual characters as well, where it is clearly stated. And we have a rather beautiful transgender moment too. And I know I shouldn't spoil anything, but this one was just so beautiful. We have a Grisha who has to magically change her appearance to a person with a different gender. And then they realize they feel more comfortable in the new gender. It's quite a heartfelt moment. We should also discuss some excellent disability rep, where Kaz walks with the cane because walking is difficult for him. This actually comes from Leigh Bardugo's own life experience of having impaired mobility. She suffers from osteonecrosis and often walks with the cane. So many people in the disabled community have lauded the authenticity of the character Kaz and how he lives with his disability. Now, you might expect a high content warning for this one. After all, the TV show was trying so hard to be the edgy new Game of Thrones. But the books are pretty damn tame. I'm genuinely struggling to think of a single adult moment. Besides, some scenes might frighten young children with the scary monsters. There's no swearing, any sex happens off screen, the violence is never especially graphic. There is one scene in Six of Crows with a lot of dead bodies. We see a flashback about a plague that sweeps the city, leading to a pile of dead bodies. That might be a bit squeamish, but otherwise I think we're good here. Is the ending worth it? Yes. So each of these series has a firm ending. It's quite a great thing, so even though the story continues into another series, you don't have to worry about cliffhangers or trailers for come and read the next book at the end of it. Each sub-series gives a firm ending. I will say the most recent book is Rule of Wolves, and there is a strong hint at the end of that book that there will be more stories to come. But as it stands, each story is concluded. How much should you try this is a bloody tricky question today, and I really can't answer it for you. So Shadow and Bone is chronologically the starting place, but it's not the strongest series. Six of Crows is the strongest series and also the most popular. You can definitely go straight to it if you want to. That's totally fine. I will confirm the King of Scars duology definitely should be read last, so that part's simple at least. Honestly, do what you want from here. If you feel like you already want to read the whole Grishaverse, then yeah, start at the beginning. If you're really only interested in Six of Crows at this point, you can go straight to it, and then maybe go back to Shadow and Bone if you're still intrigued at that point. It's your call. But that's all I've got for you today. Good luck and happy reading. And we're done. Thanks for watching. Look, some quick channel updates. Next week, we're continuing our YAnuary theme with Shades of Magic, which I just found out today is technically adult fantasy. But I already scheduled it and it's practically YA adjacent, so tough, we're doing it anyway. Also, my books are officially on sale. You can buy your copy of my ebooks, the Immortal Investigation Trilogy, in the links below. Physical copies are not quite ready. We got stuck on formatting issues because we're still new to this, but it'll only be another week or two at the most until you can order a paperback or a hardcover. But ebooks are ready today. I also have a shop and a Patreon if you want to support what I do. Otherwise, please click the like and subscribe button, write a nice comment about your thoughts on the Grishaverse or what other books you think I should talk about next. That's all for now. I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye! However, there is a prophecy of a chosen one. Since the... However, there is a prophecy of the chosen... Okay. However, there is a prophecy of a chosen one. I'm sorry.